Hello and welcome. Nice to have you here again, whether you are new or a returning visitor. And I'm really glad to share you my thoughts and ideas about different legal topics. In this video, I will be sharing some tips when applying for your child to join you here in the United Kingdom. So let's move on. The topic is about children. So there's an exclusion here. I won't be discussing about adopted children. I'll be discussing about the children that are being sponsored by their real parents. Now there's an age requirement. The age requirement is, of course, the child needs to be below 18 years old. Now, how do you prove this? In order to prove this, you will have to have a birth certificate, a long birth certificate. That means that's the original one. It's not a screenshot or anything. It's going to be a scanned copy of the original birth certificate. In addition to that, you could corroborate these documents by through the passport, some school records wherein the age of the child is shown or will somehow indicate the age of the child, and also some medical records. So that's how you're going to prove the age requirement. Now, the child also needs to be not leading an independent life. To show that, first it needs to be shown that he or she doesn't have a partner or is not living with a partner as akin to a husband and wife. So you need to take note that in some countries the marrying age is sometimes 16 years old and it's not 18, but the child that you are trying to sponsor could be 16 years old or 17 years old. So there's a possibility that the Home Office will think that depending on what country you're coming from, that the child may be leading his or her own life already. So you need to prove that it's not by giving some documents. Normally you will be able to do this by giving an explanation via a cover letter, and on that explanation, depending on the circumstances, you provide documents to show that what you are explaining on the cover letter is indeed true and correct. So the other thing is one of the things that you need to show that the child is not living an independent life is that the child must be living with the peer, and of course there's an exemption, such as if the child is living in a boarding school or maybe due to college he needs to rent an apartment somewhere to attend college. Again, you need to explain this on the cover letter, and whatever you have on the cover letter, you provide documents to show that what you are saying is indeed true. Now, there may be a situation wherein the child is living with a boyfriend occasionally. It may not be an issue, but maybe it's not in your own interest to mention it. However, if it is indeed correct that the child is living with a boyfriend, then you need to explain that it is not a relationship that is akin to a husband and wife relationship. Again, evidence to show that could be something like testimonies or an address, proof of address of the boyfriend. That is if you really need to mention that the boyfriend is present in the child's life. Of course, I'm not advising you to lie. It's always good to tell the truth, because it's if the Home Office found out via their intelligence, their own local intelligence in the country that you're applying from, then the application most likely will be refused. Okay, so the next requirement is the care requirement. Now, how do you prove that you'll be able to care for the child in the UK when he or she arrives? The first thing is accommodation. You need to show that there is sufficient accommodation for the child. Now, there's a requirement about overcrowding and space requirements for in order to say that the accommodation is sufficient. There are more to that. I will discuss that in a separate video on how you could do this. Now, to prove that, you will need some floor plans. You sketch up the floor plans, draw and measure up the area, and show the room labels. Take note that in an accommodation, the living room could be counted as a bedroom. Okay. Now, if in the event that if in the situation wherein the sponsoring parent is actually renting a space, so then you will need a letter. I would recommend that you get a letter from the landlord stating that he or she is allowing the child to live in that accommodation. Okay, so the next thing is you also need to show that when the child arrives in the UK, that the parent or the sponsoring parent needs to live together with the child that is coming to the UK. So to show this, you'll need proof of address of the parent. Now, the proof of address for the parent, this will be bank statements, letter from the government or the state, any other official documents that are addressed to the parent on the same address of the accommodation that you declared where the child will be living in the UK. Another thing is, I would also recommend that you make GP inquiries via email, so that the GP will then reply saying that you cannot yet register the child because the child is. So that is evidence that you have the intention to support the best interest of the child, the health of the child, by making inquiries. The same is true with school inquiries, because of course it is the best interest of a child to finish his or her education. So that email that you made an inquiry is evidence, one way or the other, to show that you have the interest to educate your child. So you also need to include in a cover letter an explanation on how you intend to take care of the child. An example is, what if you've got two jobs? You work from 6 o'clock in the morning, you finish at 9. So what happens to the child? How do you take care of the child? So what you need to show, what arrangements will you have in place when the child comes to the UK in order to care for him or her. The next, you also need to prove that you have a genuine relationship with the child. That it's called the relationship requirement. In order to show this, you need again the birth certificate, perhaps a letter from the from an authority such as if it was in the Philippines, a barangay captain, maybe a letter from the barangay captain saying that they attest that you are they see you as the parent coming back and forth from the UK to visit the child, and that you are taking care of him or her. A letter from a priest or a doctor, maybe. In worst circumstances, you could also provide a DNA test, although it's not necessary. In the past years, there were some instances wherein DNA test was also necessary. In many of my cover letters, I would always include how the child was came into being, like what were the circumstances, and what were the circumstances before the child was born, and after the child was born, what have you been doing, and then you put some pictures or evidence to show that the child is there. It's not mandatory to put it, but I think it would be a good evidence. Now, another important thing is the application form. The application form, more often than not, will determine whether the application is valid or not. Now, so if you are on a skilled worker route, then the application will be the application form should be a form on that following that route, so a dependent of a skilled worker. If it's under Appendix FM or like a dependent of a British national, then you follow that form for a British national. It will be quite difficult for me to explain that here because I'm not showing you any slides, but I suppose you could look it up on the look it up on the gov.uk. So, but just make sure that you make use of the correct application form. If in doubt, ask a lawyer or a friend or anybody who's done it before successfully. Now, one of the major things that are reasons why an application is refused is about sole parental responsibility. Now, to prove sole parental responsibility, you need to show that you are making the major decision in your child's life. such as did you make the decision for his or her education? How did you do that? Was it via phone call? Was it via letter? How? So show them how. So give the home office a screenshot maybe of how you made the decision. If it was via social media. The same is true with health and medical treatments. So health and medical treatment, so this is where you make decisions on, let's say your child became sick. What did you do? Did you send him to the doctor? Did you decide which hospital to go to? All of those things. Now again, this is quite difficult to prove, but if in a worst case scenario that you really don't, if you don't really have any communication records to show that, testimonials from a letter from the doctor or letter from the facility that did the treatment would be sufficient, as long as that letter says that you made the decision for them to go into that facility. The same again is true if choosing the religion. Did you choose the religion for your child? Again, a letter from the church would be good. Did you also make a decision where the child would live while you're away? Temporary care, what arrangements have you done for the temporary care of the child? To evidence that, you probably will need some sort of an affidavit or a letter coming from the temporary carer that was your arrangement. And also, if it was a temporary carer that is not related to you, you would normally pay them some salary. So evidence of salary then that you've made some payments or any sort of a gratuity or consideration that you've given to the person who who is taking care of your child temporarily. All of those evidence of those will be good evidence. Another thing to consider is did you make decisions for the holidays of the child and how he or she does attend recreations such as recreation facilities maybe, or anything that a child would normally look for, such as maybe playing maybe cycling, swimming, all of those. Do you make decisions of those things that the child would do? And if yes, then what's the evidence that you could show? So maybe photographs, letters, and all of those. The next thing is, you ask the question, how do you provide protection and guidance for the child? Normally, if you are abroad and the child is in another country, you will need to show that you are actually communicating with the child. So on your cover letter, you say that you tell the home office how are you providing guidance for the child? How do you protect them? Say for example, the child told you that I wanted to go to a late night disco where there's so many young people, but then you know that that particular place it's notorious for bad things to happen. So what did you do? Did you tell him or her not to go there? And how did you say it? So evidence to show that you have been communicating this stuff to your child. Now guidance, when as a child grows up, they will need guidance, such as how to deal with life itself, the difficulties in life. How do you show that? How do you teach your child to go through life? Now, as I'd go back to what I've said, it's mainly on communication. So you need to prove via communication that like screenshots, maybe say perhaps if you are using Facebook chat or any form of chat like WhatsApp, you could do a screenshot. You could draw a screenshot to show that there's actually you've been communicating to the child and you have been guiding the child. Worst case scenario, again, if you can't find any of these because you're making phone calls, maybe the bills of your phone showing the number that you're calling, and then on top of that, of course, you'll need to get some testimonies or letters from people who actually know that you are doing all this, and they're probably present when that you are talking to the child, and they could attest to what's going on. So everyone's circumstances are different, so you'll need to fit your evidence based on your actual circumstance. Next, serious and compelling reason. That's one of those things that you need to evidence. So you ask the question, what changed since you left the child? So how come you need to bring that child over to the UK? What happened? So it could be that the temporary carer is now unhealthy. Maybe it's a grandparent and now they're aging and they can't do most of the things they've been doing, or perhaps it has always been the plan to bring the child over, and you've actually assigned a temporary carer to that effect. So you need to evidence that by way of letters and affidavits if need be. Okay, if we're talking about if we say that the temporary carer is sick, then we need medical evidence to prove that. Okay, so in another instance, it could also be that let's say the father is still involved in the child's life. However, the father is then brought to, let's say the father is a soldier, and then the father needs to go to a different country where a child cannot be, your child cannot be taken care of, or he cannot bring the child with you. Let's say the country was at war, and the father is a soldier, will have to go to war. Of course the child cannot come with the father. So you could add that on your cover letter. Cover letter and explain what are the circumstances, so that in effect you could show that the best interest of the child can be served by moving over to the UK with just one parent. Even if the father is still involved with the child. There are many situations there are many situations wherein a father is still involved with the child, or the father and mother are still are already separate, and so on. So I think it would be best if I discuss this in a separate video, because it's quite long. This video is supposed to be a little bit, only within a few minutes. Okay, so if it's really complicated, I would recommend that you seek advice from a person who's experienced in these kinds of scenarios. And finally, again, I would remind you, always add a cover letter explaining how you make the important decisions for the child, explain your circumstances, and put a back up whatever you've written in that letter with evidence, documentary evidence that you could find. As I've said, everyone's circumstance is different from the other, so you need to make it fit. If the other parent's still involved, explain why it is to the best interest of the child to join the other in the UK. I'll try to explain that in another video, but for now, thank you for listening, and my name is Christopher Cabral. I'm one of the solicitors for Lawyery Limited, and if you require some clarifications, you need some questions, please feel free to contact us. Our website is www.lawyery.co. Okay, thank you and have a wonderful day ahead of you.